Hi everyone, welcome to the Cusuco National Park video game, a game that was developed in collaboration with students in order to provide an opportunity for students to learn about the herpetofauna of Cusuco National Park and also to teach about detection probabilities and how we do surveys for biodiversity. Um, Other than that, it's just a game that anyone can play for fun, to sort of experience running around, catching reptiles and amphibians, and yeah, hopefully learning something about the fantastic biodiversity of Cusuco National Park at the same time. So, if you've ever been to Cusuco National Park, if you've been lucky enough to have gone there or going there, then you will hopefully recognise what's around us at the moment as base camp. The students who have developed this game used real video footage and photographs of base camp to try to make it as authentic an experience as possible. Um, if you haven't been there, then yeah, not to worry, this is an opportunity for you to explore it yourselves. But if you ever do go there, then you'll know that you'll be staying in these sorts of tents and sort of basic facilities, classroom facilities, lab facilities, etc. Here's our equipment tent over here. All various bits of equipment that the scientists use as we go out and do surveys around Cusuco National Park. So what we'll do is we will get started and move out of camp and start having a look for our first reptiles and amphibians. At the moment, let's see these people sitting and having a chat. You'll notice that you start off with a head torch on. If you press the T key, you can turn that off. Now, most of the time, you're probably going to want to have that switched on, especially when you play the night level and during the day level when you go into the forest in darker places. You want that turned on. And you'll see that the graphics within the game are fantastic, but depending on the graphics card within your machine and what resolution you decide to play the game on, it may look slightly different. You can change, I should say, one of the things that you can change within the game is to what extent you have the shadows on. So I've got them on high, the high setting at the moment, but if I just duck out of here for a second, go to the menu, and I take shadows onto low, just so you can kind of see the difference here. You'll see that all those shadows go away. Now that is important to understand, because that will not only change the sort of how easy it is for you to find things. With the shadows off, it's much easier to find the things that would have been hiding in the shadows. So just bear that in mind, and also what the game looks like. It looks much nicer with those shadows on. So if at all possible, play it with the shadows on high, but that is going to cause your machine to have to kind of work a little bit harder. So figure out what works for you on your particular machine. Have a play. If you have ever been to base camp in Cusuco National Park, you may think, well, why on earth is there a stream running around the back of it? That's not actually there in reality. This was just a bit of poetic license that we put in just so that we can have some amphibians a little bit closer to camp. Sort of play around it, because the amphibians are typically linked to the areas, the riparian areas, areas with water. And okay, so we've got our first detection here. So if we look in front of us in that grass, you may be able to see some lizards. I'm going to move closer. The game does not sort of allow the animals to move, so don't worry about them running off on you. I'm just going to turn the torch off for a second so you get a better look. So we've got 4 lizards just on this little patch here. And in reality, if you're doing a survey, these would have probably disappeared long before we ever got over to them. But if we just have them in the centre of our screen, we press E, we can start picking them up. You do need to have the animals sort of pretty much in the centre of the screen for you to actually pick them up. So if you're struggling, just try to kind of move into the right place. Right, so we've picked those up. If I press Tab, I can open up my inventory and see that we've got our first species in there. We've only got one picture here with a little 4 in the corner to show that we've found one species and we found 4 of them. So that was the Moralett's alligator lizard. So by putting our cursor over the image, this little pop-up gives us a little bit more information, which all of this information has been taken largely from the main book that used the ID guide, which was the book that was developed by Tom Brown and others, the herpetofauna of Cusuco National Park. So by giving people a little bit of information within the game, you can find out things, interesting things about morphology, distinctive features about the species, geographic distribution. So this species range extends from southern Mexico to northern Nicaragua, including Guatemala, Salvador, Honduras. Gives you a bit of information about elevational ranges. IUCN Red List status, this species being identified as being of least concern. And we also have an environmental vulnerability score, which is a publication score of kind of the vulnerability of that species within Central America. So 13, medium vulnerability to environmental degradation. So you can play this game, you can find species, you can just run around whatever you want, just look for species, find information about them. And so it can be a great educational tool, either for yourself, just if you want to learn about species at Cusuco National Park, or if you're teaching a class and you want students to learn something about the diversity of the area, then you can send people off, let them have an explore, try to find out some facts. You can set them specific tasks to find certain species that have maybe a particular IUCN Red List status, whatever you want to do. There's lots of kind of different ways you can play this game. But ultimately, you're going to be developing, you're going to be in your sort of your bag of species as you go around collecting. We're going to get a community that will also include our abundance data in there. So you can walk into the streams, and that's where you're going to find a lot of the amphibians and species that are associated with riparian areas. The students have done their best to try to make take into account the habitat preferences of the species. Certainly, we've taken into account whether they're more likely to be encountered during the day or at night. So some species you will only encounter in the nighttime level, and some you'll only encounter in the daytime level, and the relative abundance of those species is set based on how often we encounter them. So you'll see we've got another couple of species here. Again, they're not going to run away from us, so we can take our time to have a little look, and we can pick them up. So the lizard here, which looks like it may be a different species to the alligator lizards that we just picked up. So just try and get that in the center of my screen so it will pick him up. There we go. And we've got a snake over here, which I can also grab. So if we open our inventory again, we can see that we've now got 2 more species. So we've got Schmidt's emerald lizard, and we have got a striped lizard eater, each with their own sort of facts about those species. So as I was saying, the encounter rates of species are relative abundance. So the most commonly encountered species in Cusuco National Park, those that we found from our own data sets through the Operation Wallacea research surveys over several years, we took that data, and those species that we found most often while doing those surveys, you will also find most frequently within this game. You will just find them a lot more frequently than in real life, just to kind of keep that level of interest and detection up, so you're not having to play the game for hours and hours before you find your first species, because whilst that may be the reality of doing biodiversity surveys, it doesn't really translate into a very fun and useful educational experience. The other thing that's slightly wacky within this game, you see this giant lizard on this tree. Some of the modelling of the species is because it's been created by students. Some of the sort of the scaling isn't necessarily kind of ideal. This is likely going to be an anolis lizard, which, if you know anything about anolis lizards, they are not anywhere near that big. So if we grab that and we look, we can see that this is Mayer's anole, which, as you see from the photo, fits very easily between some of these fingers within their hand. It's not a big lizard, nowhere near as large as it looks within the game. But that's fine, because if they were really small, it would make them very difficult to find. But it's just one of the quirks of the game, and something that we'll be looking at in future versions. Just bear that in mind, that the idea, and kind of within this version of the game, not necessarily to make everything look perfect and exactly as you would find it within in a real world situation, but to try to kind of make things stand out a little bit more and make it a fun, enjoyable game where we can detect species and learn about them. Okay, so we've picked up another lizard there, possibly the same species. We can have a look in a moment. Now, there's a couple of different ways that we can go within this game, and it's very easy to get turned around and lost. You may, as I'm walking around, see things on the ground and in the trees that I'm missing. That's part of the point, really, so that not everyone's going to see the same things. It's going to depend on how quickly you're moving through the environment, just as it would in real life. So we've got another snake down here. Pick that up. So again, opening up our inventory to see what we've now found. So the other lizard was a Cortez anole, which is endemic to Cusuco National Park. So one of the park endemics, which is fantastic to be able to include in here. We found a scorpion-eating snake, so Degenhardt scorpion-eating snake, and we found our first venomous snake, our Central American jumping pit viper. I should also say that we haven't been able to model every species that you might encounter in Cusuco National Park, just because of time constraints. So we decided that we would model roughly the 10 most either common or maybe important species within Cusuco National Park. So 10 most important snakes, 10 lizards, 10 frogs / toads, and 10 salamanders. So there's approximately 40 species that can be found within the game, which is a good, a nice representation of species that can be found in Cusuco. Some of them were chosen because of sort of ecological interest, just kind of interesting species to include. Others were included because they are important, especially those that are endemic to Cusuco National Park were included within the game. But it's sort of for you to have a little play around, see what you can find, and then learn about the species that you do find. Okay, so we're starting to steadily build our list of species. If you really take your time to look around, there are some little leaflet of frogs and things that are particularly difficult to find. Some things, like this coral snake that we've just encountered here, stand out very, very easily. It's quite difficult to miss, but that's also the point of their coloration. Another lizard in the bushes over here, which you can grab. The sounds that you're hearing as we're moving around, those birds, these are all recordings of Cusuco National Park. So these were sound recordings that were taken during one of the field seasons. So everything that you are hearing is they are authentic sounds of what it would actually sound like on the trail at Cusuco National Park, which is really, really lovely. Okay, so you'll notice that the number of encounters that we're getting is it's almost sort of kind of laughable. You're not going to find this level of detections when you're doing the real surveys, but we need them to be artificially high so that we can build some nice data sets quite quickly for you to use, and also for you to learn from the species. There's no point in you having to play the game for several hours to find 2 or 3 species, because that's not a very effective or efficient game for learning. Okay, so I'm just going to have a little run along here quite quickly. I may be missing things as I go, but I think if I keep heading along this path, if I've gone the right way, which I may not have done, I think there was a pool around somewhere, some water where we might be able to find some amphibians, but there's also the possibility that I have gone the wrong way, which I may well have done, but that's not to worry. But there's only a couple of sort of different ways that you can really go within the game, but it's surprisingly easy when you're not familiar with the transact layout to get sort of turned around and go the wrong way. But, I think this might eventually take me back to base camp. We'll see. Oh, no, this hasn't taken me to base camp, which is fine, but it has taken me to some water, so we can have a little look around here, see if we can find some amphibians, because we found lizards and snakes so far, but I don't think we found any amphibians. So let's have a look to see if we can find them. And this is where the torch actually is really useful for kind of having that focal point. Okay, so we've got a snake that is sticking its head out here, which is likely to be Bothrax marshite, and if we look on this rock here, we've got our first, what I think is our first amphibian. So I shall pick that fella up. You'll notice in the top right hand corner we have our total count of species, sorry, not species, the abundance, the number of individuals, animals that we have found in total, 25, and now we can see the different species. So there's 8 species going across each row, so we've got 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 species that we found so far. So our species richness to this point is 13, but you'll see that we've got the numbers of each of those species that we have found. So from that data we can calculate not only species richness, but we can start looking at different biodiversity indices that will take into account not just the number of species, but how abundant each species is, or how evenly distributed kind of our diversity is. Do we have just 1 or 2 very, very common species, and then lots of species that are encountered not very commonly at all, or is it kind of more even than that? So from those last 2 that we picked up, we've got March's palm pit viper, one of our focal species that we're doing some really nice genetics research on, and we've got one of our endemics to Cusuco National Park, the Plectrophyllodacipus, the Honduras spike thumb frog. Beautiful species, critically endangered, endemic only to Cusuco National Park. But actually, within the park, if you're there, one of the species of frog that you will regularly encounter, so sort of locally reasonably abundant, or detectable at least, but in terms of its overall distribution, very, very restricted, critically endangered. Okay, so we've got a feel for how the game works, what it looks like, and really this is an opportunity for you to download the game. It's completely free. So you can get a copy of the game for free on your own machine, and just start exploring. So either if you just want to have a play and learn about the species, then you can do that, or if you're using it as a teaching tool, then there's obviously ways in which you can get your class to play, ideally getting the game installed on a number of different machines, or allowing students to take it in turns to play, so that they build their own species list of the community list of what they have found. And it's a good idea when doing that to think about setting some rules. How long are you going to play the game for? And recording the survey time. Obviously, the longer you play, the more species you're likely to find. But there's other things that are going to affect that as well. It's like how good is an individual at seeing things as they're walking around, but also there's an element of how comfortable are they with the controls. If it takes somebody a long time to figure out how to move around, if they're not used to this sort of gameplay, then they're less likely to find as many species. And I guess that there's similarities with working in the field, how comfortable and confident people are with particular methods and surveys, as to kind of what they might find within a certain time frame of doing a biodiversity survey. Okay, so we will leave it there for now, and we may make some additional videos in the future to explore some of the details further. Have fun.